The land stretched wide under the endless sky, brown and gold under the morning light. The wind moved through the tall grass like a restless whisper. On that land stood a wooden farmhouse weathered by years of storms and seasons. Inside lived a man named Tom Harris, a rancher who worked from dawn to dusk, raising 6 children on his own after his wife had passed away 2 years ago. Tom was strong and kind, but his face had grown older than his age. His eyes showed quiet sadness that never left him. He tried to be both father and mother, working the fields by day and caring for the little ones by night. His house was always filled with small voices, laughter in daylight and soft crying after dark. The children were good-hearted but restless. Ella, the eldest, tried to act grown though she was barely 12. Ben and Liam, twin boys, always found trouble in their endless energy. Sarah, the gentle one, clung to her father's sleeve wherever he went. Molly, small and curious, asked questions from sunrise till bedtime. And Jake, the youngest, still cried for his mother in his sleep. But there was one thing that troubled the ranch more than anything else. No one in that house truly slept. When night fell, the room stayed awake. The wind outside made the old house groan, and every sound of creaking wood seemed to wake another child. One would start crying, and soon all 6 would be up. Tom would walk from room to room, holding one, calming another, whispering stories until the first light returned. He had tried everything a father could think of: warm milk, soft songs, even sitting beside their beds till morning, but the sleep never came easy. It felt as if peace itself had left the house when their mother did. The nights were long and Tom's heart was heavy. The neighbors often spoke about him with mixed pity and admiration. Some said it was too much for one man to handle alone. Others believed the children were haunted by the sadness of loss. Old women in town said the spirits of the plains were unsettled, wandering through lonely homes at night. Tom didn't believe in such talk, but when he looked at his tired children each morning, he wondered if something unseen really followed them. One gray morning, as the wind carried dust across the yard, a young woman came walking down the dirt road. She wore a faded dress patched at the sleeves, and her shoes looked worn from many miles. Her name was Mary Clark. She had no family left, no home, and carried little more than a small bundle of clothes. She had heard in town that the Harris ranch needed help: a maid, a cook, someone to keep the house in order. When she reached the gate, Tom was fixing a wagon wheel. He looked up, saw the stranger, and wiped his hands on his shirt. Mary stood straight though her shoulders were tired. "Sir," she said softly, "I heard you might need help on the ranch. I can work hard. I don't need much, just a place to stay and meals to eat." Tom studied her for a moment. She didn't look strong, but there was steadiness in her eyes. He had turned away many helpers before, fearing strangers around his children, but something about this woman felt different. "You can start today," he said simply. "We could use another pair of hands." From that day, Mary became part of the house. She woke before dawn to make breakfast, scrubbed the floors, washed the children's clothes, and helped in the kitchen garden. The little ones watched her quietly at first, unsure what to make of her calm voice and gentle way. She never raised her tone, never hurried them, and always smiled, even when her hands were sore. In a week, the house began to change. The rooms felt cleaner, the kitchen smelled warm with fresh bread, and Tom noticed laughter returning to the dinner table. But when night came, the same old trouble returned. The children still couldn't sleep. One would wake crying, another would ask for water, and soon the whole house would be awake again. Mary began to wonder if something deeper was wrong. One evening while sweeping, she noticed how the children's laughter stopped whenever Tom's face turned sad. Even when he smiled, his eyes looked far away. The children carried that same quiet pain in their hearts. It was not fear that kept them awake, it was grief. They missed the softness their mother once brought, the peace that came from being gently cared for. That night, Mary decided to stay awake. She sat by the small lamp in the hallway, listening to the sounds of the night. The wind brushed against the windows. The old clock ticked slowly, and every so often a child murmured in sleep. When the youngest cried out, she went quietly into the room. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she sat by his bed and hummed a low tune she remembered from her own childhood. A lullaby her mother used to sing when storms passed over their cabin long ago. The song was simple, like the wind through wheat, gentle and steady. She kept humming until Jake's breathing slowed and his tiny hand relaxed on the blanket. When she looked up, she saw the other children peeking from their doorways, drawn by the sound. She smiled softly. Back to bed, little ones, she whispered. Let's chase the dreams instead of the night. The next morning, the children were calmer. They followed Mary around the kitchen as she cooked, asking her about the song. It's a magic song, Liam said with a grin. It made Jake stop crying. Mary laughed. No magic, she said. Just love and a tune. When Tom came in from the barn, he found the children helping Mary peel potatoes. For the first time in months, he saw peace in their faces. You've done more in a week than I could in a year, he said quietly. Mary shook her head. They just needed someone to listen. That evening, after supper, she tried something new. She gathered the children near the fire and told them a story, a gentle one about stars that watched over lonely travelers. She let them ask questions, laugh, and talk. When the sky grew dark, she led them upstairs one by one, humming the same tune again. Tom sat by the window waiting for the usual cries to begin. But none came. The house was silent except for the crackle of the fire. He went to check and found all 6 children fast asleep, their faces peaceful in the dim candlelight. Mary sat in the hallway with her hands folded, the soft light of the candle shining on her tired face. For a moment, Tom couldn't speak. He stood there, taking in the sight of what he had thought impossible, a quiet house, 6 sleeping children, and a calm he hadn't known in years. Mary looked up and smiled. Sometimes, she said softly, children don't need silence to sleep. They need to know someone is watching over them. Tom nodded, his throat tight. He wanted to thank her but found no words big enough. He only said, You've given this house back its peace. She shook her head again. No, sir. The peace was always here. It was just hiding behind sadness. That night the wind still moved across the plains, but it sounded different now. Gentler, like it was singing along with the old lullaby. Tom lay down for the first time in many months and closed his eyes without fear of being woken. In the quiet of the night, Mary checked on each child once more. She tucked the blankets, fixed the small candle, and smiled at the faces sleeping so soundly. Then she sat by the window and looked out at the stars. She thought of her own mother, of long roads and lonely travels, and how strange it was that peace could be found in a place that had once known only sorrow. When dawn came, golden light poured through the window. The rooster crowed and the ranch came alive again, but this time it was different. Laughter drifted through the house as the children woke, well-rested and bright. Tom came down the stairs, surprised to see them ready for breakfast without a single tear. Mary poured him coffee with a gentle smile. Good morning, Mr. Harris, she said. The children slept. He nodded, still amazed. I almost didn't believe it. I thought maybe I was dreaming too. Maybe, she replied softly, but sometimes good dreams come true when hearts find rest. Outside, the sun rose over the plains, washing the land in gold. Inside that small wooden farmhouse, peace had finally returned. And though no one said it aloud, they all knew something had changed forever. The morning after that peaceful night felt different. The ranch seemed to breathe again. Sunlight filled every corner of the small farmhouse, touching walls that had long felt dull. The air smelled of warm bread, and the soft sound of children's laughter mixed with the clinking of dishes. Tom Harris stood in the doorway, hardly believing what he saw. For the first time in months, all 6 of his children were awake with smiles instead of tears. They spoke to each other kindly, helping Mary set the table, their faces fresh from real rest. Tom had forgotten what mornings like this felt like, quiet joy instead of exhaustion. Mary moved about the kitchen with easy grace. She poured coffee for Tom, milk for the children, and served the simple meal she had prepared: cornbread, eggs, and fried potatoes. It wasn't much, but it tasted better than anything he remembered. Peace had returned, at least for now. After breakfast, the children ran outside to play. The wind carried their laughter across the wide land, echoing through the empty fields. Tom watched them from the porch, his rough hands resting on the railing. Then he looked toward Mary, who was wiping the table with calm hands. You did something last night, he said quietly. Mary looked up with a small smile. I didn't do much, sir. I just sang. Whatever you did, Tom replied, worked like a miracle. Mary shook her head. It wasn't a miracle. The children just needed to feel safe again. When hearts are heavy, sleep won't come. But when someone listens, peace finds its way back. Tom nodded slowly, her words sinking deep. He realized how long it had been since anyone had spoken to him with that kind of understanding. Days passed, and the ranch grew livelier. Mary's soft influence began to show in every corner of the house. She taught the older girls how to sew torn clothes and showed the twins how to feed the chickens properly. She even turned chores into games, teaching them to count eggs or race to stack firewood neatly. The house that once echoed with crying now rang with laughter. In the evenings, after supper, she gathered them around the small fire and told stories from her childhood, tales about riverboats, forests, and a grandmother who baked bread that could calm any storm. The children listened wide-eyed, and Tom, though pretending to read by the lamp, often found himself smiling too. But despite the peace, Mary noticed that Tom still carried a quiet sadness. When the children laughed too loud, his smile sometimes faded. When he thought no one was watching, his eyes turned distant, fixed on the framed picture of his late wife that hung by the door. One night, when everyone else had gone to bed, Mary stayed in the kitchen cleaning. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Tom standing there with a tired look. "You should rest too," he said softly. "I will soon," she replied. The children's boots were muddy. "I'll dry them by the fire so they're ready for morning." He nodded and sat at the table, staring at the lantern flame. "They haven't slept like that in years," he said. "I thought it was hopeless," Mary smiled gently. "Nothing stays hopeless forever, Mr. Harris. Sometimes all it takes is a bit of kindness and a song." Tom looked at her then, really looked, as if noticing her for the first time. Her dress was plain, her hair tied loosely, but there was calm strength in her presence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he cleared his throat and said, "You remind me of someone. My wife used to sing too, the same way, soft and steady, like she was talking to the stars." Mary lowered her eyes. "Maybe that's why the children listened. They must have remembered her voice through mine." The silence that followed was gentle, not heavy. Tom finally stood. "Thank you," he said simply, and walked back to his room. Mary watched the door close, feeling something warm stir in her chest. A quiet respect for a man who carried too much alone. As weeks went by, the seasons began to change. The nights grew cooler, and Mary helped the children collect wood for the fire. She mended their quilts and taught them to say small prayers of thanks before bed. Every night before the candle was blown out, she sang the same lullaby, and the house would grow still until morning. One Saturday evening, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky turned dark and the wind began to howl across the plains. Thunder cracked and rain beat against the windows. The children huddled close to Mary, their eyes wide. "It's just a bit of sky noise," she said cheerfully. "Even the heavens need to wash now and then." The smallest child, Jake, clung to her skirt. "Will it break the roof?" he asked fearfully. "Not tonight," she said, smoothing his hair. "This roof has stood through worse. Listen, hear how it sings?" She began humming again, her voice rising just loud enough to cover the thunder. Slowly, the fear faded. Tom, standing in the doorway, watched as his children's heads leaned against one another, calm once more. The sight made his heart ache, but in a good way, a deep kind of relief. After the storm passed, the ranch smelled fresh and new. The next morning, Tom found the children gathering wildflowers for Mary to thank her for keeping them brave through the night. She smiled at the bunch of uneven stems and placed them in a jar on the table. "These are more beautiful than any bouquet I've seen," she said. Tom watched the moment quietly. He began to notice how much lighter the children had become. They laughed without worry, ran through the fields, and even helped each other without quarrels. He realized it wasn't just their sleep Mary had healed, it was their spirit. One evening, while fixing a broken fence, Tom looked up at the sunset. Mary was in the distance, helping the girls hang laundry on the line. The wind caught her hair, and for a second he felt an emotion he hadn't felt since his wife's passing. Not love exactly, but gratitude so deep it felt close to it. Later that night, when everyone was inside, he sat on the porch and called out as she passed. "Mary," she stopped. "Yes, sir?" "You've done more for this family than I can ever repay." Her eyes softened. "You don't need to repay kindness, Mr. Harris. It has a way of coming back on its own." He smiled faintly. "Still, I mean it. The ranch feels alive again. I feel lighter." She looked at him, her voice gentle. "You were never alone, sir. You just forgot how to let someone help." The truth of that struck him harder than he expected. He looked away toward the open plains where the stars were beginning to rise. "I suppose I did forget," he murmured. Mary stepped closer and said quietly, It's easy to forget when you're carrying too much. He turned toward her then and saw a kindness in her face that reminded him of hope itself. For a long moment they stood there in the quiet evening, two people who had both lost something yet somehow found a bit of peace in the same house. As autumn deepened, the ranch became a place of warmth again. Neighbors noticed the change. When they visited, they were surprised to find the children happy, their laughter echoing from the barn. Some asked Tom how he managed it. He only smiled and said, "Someone reminded us what peace sounds like." Mary never sought attention for what she had done. She kept to her work, her joy found in the small things, teaching the twins to read simple words, showing Sarah how to bake her first loaf of bread, or mending the youngest toy horse with bits of string. At night, when the household was quiet, she often sat by the window humming softly to herself. Sometimes Tom would pass by the hallway and pause, listening to that voice. It filled the house with something deeper than sound, something like healing. Each night ended the same way now. 6 children sleeping soundly, a father resting without fear, and a woman sitting quietly under the stars, watching over them all. No one could have guessed that only weeks earlier, this same house had been full of sleepless cries. The change felt almost magical, yet it was born from something very simple. One person's care, one song, and one heart willing to listen. And though Tom Harris never said it aloud, he knew deep down that his home, once broken by sorrow, had begun to heal because a poor frontier maid had brought light where darkness once lived. The ranch moved into the colder months with a calm rhythm. Morning frost covered the grass and the chimney smoked softly every dawn. The children now woke up rested, cheerful, and ready for chores. Their laughter filled the air and even the animals seemed livelier. The old farmhouse that once felt heavy with sorrow had become a warm, living home again. Mary had become the quiet heart of that house. She didn't act important or proud. She moved through the day with kindness in her steps, helping the children, caring for the animals, and keeping the house clean and bright. She knew which child needed comfort, which one needed gentle discipline, and which one just wanted to be heard. She had brought not only sleep but also hope to the Harris family. One morning, Tom found her by the barn helping the twins tie new ropes for the horses. The wind was sharp and her hands were red from the cold, but she still smiled as the boys showed her their work. Tom stopped and watched for a while, realizing again how much she had changed their world. "You don't have to do all that," he said, stepping closer. "You already work more than anyone I know." Mary looked up, brushing hair from her face. "I like helping. It keeps my hands warm," she said with a small grin. Tom smiled back. "You've got away with this place," he said softly. "Since you came, it feels alive again." Mary's eyes softened. "It's not me, Mr. Harris, it's them. The children just needed a bit of love and someone to remind them that life can still be good." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I think we all needed reminding." As winter deepened, life became harder on the frontier. The snow came early and thick. The ranch was far from town and supplies ran low. Tom had to ride several miles through deep snow to buy grain and firewood. Mary stayed behind, keeping the house warm and the children safe. One night, a strong storm rolled across the plains. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the windows. The fire burned low and the children huddled together in the sitting room. Mary checked the lamps and closed the shutters tight. She had seen storms before, but this one felt stronger than usual. "Will Papa be all right out there?" Ella asked, her small voice trembling. Mary looked into the child's worried eyes and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father is the bravest man I've met," she said calmly. "He knows these lands better than anyone. The storm will tire before he does." But in truth, her heart was uneasy. Hours passed and the sound of the wind grew louder. The snow hit the windows like handfuls of gravel. She tried to keep the children calm by telling stories and singing, but her eyes often moved to the door. Near midnight, the firewood ran low. Mary wrapped herself in a shawl, went outside for more, and felt the cold bite her skin. The world outside was white and wild. The snow rose almost to her knees. She struggled to carry the wood inside, her hands trembling, but she didn't stop. When she returned, Jake was asleep by the fire, and the others were drowsy. She tucked them under blankets and sat near the door, waiting. Finally, just before dawn, she heard the faint sound of hooves through the wind. She ran to open the door and saw Tom riding in, covered in snow. His face was red from the cold, but his eyes were steady. "Thank heaven," she whispered. He climbed down, his legs stiff, The bridge froze, he said through chattering teeth. Had to take the long way around. Mary helped him inside and gave him a blanket. The children woke, running to hug him. The sight warmed her heart. When the family finally gathered around the fire again, Tom looked at her and said, "You kept them calm. I knew you would." "I just did what anyone would," she replied. "Not anyone," he said firmly. "Only someone who truly cares." Over the next days, they were snowed in. The world outside turned silent under the white blanket, and they lived by candlelight and warm stew. Mary taught the children to make paper birds and hang them near the fireplace. She showed them how to count stars when the storm finally cleared, telling them each one was a wish waiting to be spoken. At night, she sang, her voice soft and pure. Tom often listened quietly from the next room, his eyes closed. The sound eased the weariness in his heart. One evening after the children were asleep, he joined her by the fire. She was mending one of Ben's torn coats, her fingers moving carefully through the fabric. "You remind me of my wife sometimes," he said suddenly. Mary froze for a moment, then spoke softly. "She must have been very kind." "She was," Tom said, staring at the flames. "Strong, too. She loved the children more than anything. When she fell ill, I promised her I'd take care of them. But after she passed, I didn't know how to be both parents at once." Mary nodded slowly. "No one truly can. A home needs more than hands, it needs warmth. You gave them the best you could, Mr. Harris. You just needed time for your heart to heal, too." Her words were gentle, not pitying. Tom looked at her and saw understanding in her eyes. Not judgment, not sorrow, just simple kindness. For a long time, they sat in silence, listening to the soft crackle of the fire. The days grew longer again, and spring finally touched the land. Snow melted into streams and green grass began to return. The children helped plant vegetables in the garden. Mary showed them how to place seeds carefully in neat lines, telling them that good things take time to grow. Tom watched her with quiet admiration. He noticed how naturally she guided the children, how her patience never ran out. The house felt lighter now, as if it had found a rhythm that had been missing for years. But peace rarely lasts without a test. One afternoon, word came from the nearby town that Tom's older brother had fallen ill. The man lived alone several miles away and needed help. Tom had to leave again for a few days. The memory of the storm still lingered in the children's minds and fear flickered in their eyes. "Will you come back soon, Papa?" little Molly asked, holding his coat sleeve. "I'll be back before the week's end," Tom said gently. "You be good for Mary, all right?" The children nodded, though worry clouded their faces. After he left, Mary took charge, making sure they stayed busy. They milked the cow, fed the hens, and played near the barn when chores were done. At night, she told them stories about brave travelers who always came home. Still, as days passed, they began to miss their father deeply. Jake cried one evening, saying he dreamed his papa was lost in the woods. Mary knelt beside him, took his hand, and said softly, "Dreams can be tricky, little one. Sometimes they only come to remind us how much we love someone." She sang until his tears stopped, and one by one the others drifted off to sleep. On the fifth evening, as the sun began to set, they saw a lone figure riding over the hill. The children ran shouting toward the gate. Tom waved, tired but smiling. Mary stood on the porch, relief spreading through her heart. When he dismounted, he looked around the quiet, orderly house. "Everything's just as I left it," he said with a small smile. "Of course," Mary replied. "We took good care of home." He looked at her with gratitude. "You're more than just help here, Mary. You've become part of this family." She lowered her eyes, touched by his words. "That means more than you know, Mr. Harris." That night, the family ate supper together, laughter filling the air once more. The twins told stories about how they had chased a rabbit near the barn, and Molly proudly showed the small doll she'd sewn with Mary's help. Tom sat back watching them, his eyes glistening in the firelight. After the children went to bed, he spoke quietly. "I used to think peace had left this place for good, but now I see it was just waiting for the right person to remind us how to live again." Mary smiled gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "Peace never leaves, sir. It just hides until someone lights a little hope again." The night grew quiet, and outside the stars shone brighter than they had in years. Inside that house there was warmth, laughter, and the sound of calm breathing behind every door. Tom realized that the woman who had come to his gate with nothing but a hopeful heart had given him back everything he had lost. Sleep, laughter, and the simple joy of being a family again. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew this peace was something rare, a gift that would never be forgotten. The days of spring slowly turned into the warm breath of summer. The plains around the Harris Ranch were now green and bright, dotted with wildflowers that swayed under the blue sky. Life on the ranch had settled into a peaceful rhythm. The children woke early, helped with small chores, and then spent their afternoons chasing butterflies, picking berries, or reading stories Mary taught them to love. Mary had become part of the family in every sense. She no longer felt like a maid. She felt like someone who belonged. She still worked hard, washing, cooking, tending the garden, but it was no longer out of duty. It was out of care. Every corner of the house carried her touch, from the neatly folded quilts to the flowers she placed in jars on the windowsill. Tom Harris noticed the change every day. His children had grown brighter, healthier, and happier. The sadness that had once shadowed the house had faded away like morning fog. Yet sometimes when he saw Mary laughing with the children or teaching Molly to sew, he felt a strange ache in his chest, something warm, unfamiliar, and deeply human. He never spoke of it, but the feeling stayed with him. One warm afternoon, a letter arrived from town. The mailman brought it on horseback and handed it to Mary while Tom was out in the pasture. It was addressed to her in neat handwriting she recognized at once. Her heart skipped a beat. She sat on the porch, opened it slowly, and read. It was from a family she had once worked for years ago before wandering west. They wrote that they had settled in a growing town far away and needed a housekeeper they could trust. They offered her good wages, a small room, and a chance for a steadier life. Mary sat there for a long while, the letter trembling in her hand. The words seemed both kind and heavy. It was a real offer, a promise of comfort, security, and rest after years of hard traveling. But when she looked up and saw the children playing in the yard, she felt her heart twist. The sound of their laughter filled her like sunlight. Could she really leave them now? That evening, Tom returned from the fields. He noticed her quiet mood and asked gently, "Something on your mind, Mary?" She hesitated, then handed him the letter. "It came today. It's from people I once worked for. They're offering me a position." Tom read it slowly, his eyes darkening. "That's a good offer," he said at last. "You deserve comfort after all the work you've done here." "I'm not sure I could go," she said softly. "This place feels like home now." Tom looked at her, unsure what to say. He wanted to ask her to stay, but the words caught in his throat. He had no right to stop her from choosing a better life. "Whatever you decide," he finally said, "just know you've already done more for this family than anyone could." The days that followed were quiet. Mary went about her chores as usual, but the children noticed her distant eyes. Ella asked one morning, "Mary, are you leaving?" Mary paused in her sweeping. "Maybe," she said softly. "Someone sent me a letter about work, but nothing is decided yet." The younger ones looked worried. "But who will sing us to sleep?" Molly asked in a trembling voice. Mary knelt beside her. "Even if I go far away, you'll still have the songs inside you. You can sing them yourselves." The thought made Molly cry harder, and Mary hugged her gently. The other children gathered close. She realized then how much she had come to love them, as if they were her own. That night she sat by the fire alone, the letter beside her. Tom came in quietly and sat across from her. The room glowed softly with lamplight. "I saw the children today," he said. "They were whispering about you leaving." Mary nodded. "I told them the truth. I haven't decided yet." Tom leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What's keeping you unsure?" She met his eyes. "Because this house isn't just work to me. It's where I found something I thought I'd lost, a place to belong. But I also know you may not always need me here. One day the children will grow and you'll move on." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Mary, you gave this family back its heart. If you go, it won't just be the children who'll miss you. I will too." The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. "I never wanted to cause pain," she whispered. "You haven't," he said. "You brought healing, and maybe that's why it's hard to let go." Neither of them spoke after that. The fire burned low and the wind outside rustled the trees. The next morning, Mary packed her few belongings in a small bag, still unsure what choice she would make. She wanted to do what was right, not what was easy. When she walked outside, she saw the children sitting by the fence waiting for her. They held small gifts, A ribbon, a flower, a piece of wood shaped into a heart. "Mary," Ben said, "if you go, will you come back someday?" She knelt down, her eyes soft and full. "If life allows it, yes. And if I can't, I'll still think of you all every day." They hugged her tightly, not wanting to let go. She held them close, her heart aching. Tom stood by the porch watching silently. She walked up to him. "I'll go into town tomorrow and give them my answer," she said quietly. He nodded. "Whatever you choose, I'll respect it." That evening, a calm silence filled the house. The children were unusually quiet at dinner. Mary tried to smile, telling them stories to ease their hearts. When the meal was done, she sang the old lullaby one more time. Her voice trembled slightly, but she sang through it, watching the children drift into sleep. When all was still, Tom came to the doorway. "You sang that one like it was a goodbye," he said softly. Mary looked at him, tears in her eyes. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just to remind them that peace stays even when people leave. He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "And what about your peace, Mary? Where will you find it?" She smiled faintly. "Sometimes peace isn't a place. It's knowing you helped someone find theirs." Tom looked down, unsure how to answer. He wanted to tell her not to go. He wanted to tell her that the ranch was not home without her. But he knew she was a woman of her own will, and her life had been one long road of choices and quiet courage. The next morning dawned soft and golden. The air smelled of dew and grass. Mary came down the stairs with her small bag and found Tom waiting on the porch with the wagon ready. The children stood nearby, sleepy-eyed and sad. "I'll take you as far as the town road," Tom said. Mary looked around at the house, at the walls that had once been filled with sorrow and now held only warmth. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For trusting me when I had nothing." Tom nodded. "You gave us more than we ever expected." The ride to the town road was silent. Birds sang in the distance and the wheels creaked softly against the dirt. When they reached the crossroads, Tom stopped the wagon. Mary looked out across the land, her heart heavy. "I'll never forget this place," she said. "Or any of you." He turned to her. "You're part of this family now, no matter where you go." For a moment she wanted to stay, to turn back, to run to the children waiting at home. But the letter in her pocket reminded her of another kind of life waiting. She climbed down slowly, her shoes sinking into the dust. Tom tipped his hat. "Safe travels, Mary." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Goodbye, Mr. Harris." He watched her walk down the road until she was a small figure against the rising sun. The world felt quieter without her, emptier somehow. When he turned the wagon homeward, the wind carried the faint sound of her song, like a blessing left behind. Back at the ranch, the children waited by the gate. When they saw him return alone, they ran to him crying. He lifted the smallest into his arms and said softly, "She's not gone forever. Some people never really leave, they just stay in the heart." That night, for the first time in months, he sat by the window alone. The house was still but not lonely. He could almost hear her voice in the wind, the same lullaby that had once saved them all. And as the stars filled the sky above the quiet plains, Tom Harris whispered to himself, "She changed this home. She changed us all." The weeks passed slowly after Mary left the ranch. The children tried to go on with their daily routines, but the house felt different without her. The mornings were quieter, the evenings longer. No one sang at night anymore. The old lullaby still lived in their hearts, but it was not the same without her soft voice. Tom Harris felt the emptiness too. He went about his work with steady hands but heavy thoughts. Every time he came into the kitchen, he half expected to see her by the stove humming softly while stirring the pot. Every time he saw the children playing near the barn, he remembered how she used to guide them with calm patience. Even the wind seemed quieter without her songs drifting through the halls. The children missed her in their own ways. Ella tried to be responsible and help more, but sometimes she sat by the window and stared down the long road where Mary had gone. Ben and Liam argued less now. They just played quietly, often pretending to hear her voice reminding them to behave. Sarah spent hours drawing pictures of the ranch, always including Mary in them. Molly carried the ribbon Mary had given her tied around her wrist, and little Jake sometimes woke up at night calling her name. Tom watched all this with a heavy heart. He had told them Mary might never come back, but deep down he hoped she would. Not because the work was too much, he could handle that, but because she had become the light of the home. Without her, something important was missing. One morning, a strong wind blew from the east, bringing with it the smell of rain and distant thunder. Tom was in the field mending a fence when he saw a rider coming down the long road. He shaded his eyes with his hand, watching closely. As the figure drew nearer, his heart skipped a beat. The rider was small, the coat familiar. When she came closer, he saw her face. It was Mary. She looked thinner, a little tired, but her eyes still had that same calm strength. She dismounted slowly, smiling shyly as the children ran from the porch screaming her name. They surrounded her with laughter and tears, hugging her legs, holding her hands, asking all at once where she had been. Tom stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then he walked forward, his voice quiet. "Mary, you came back," she nodded, her smile trembling. "If I hadn't, my heart would never have rested." He looked at her closely. "Didn't the job work out?" She shook her head gently. "The family was kind, the home was fine, but every night when I looked out the window, I missed this place. I missed the sound of the children's laughter and the way this land smells after rain. I realized this was the only place that ever felt like home." Tom's voice softened. "And the letter? I wrote them back," she said. "I thanked them, but I told them I had already found the place I belonged." The children clapped and cheered, and even Tom couldn't stop a smile from spreading across his tired face. "Then you're home again," he said quietly. That evening was the happiest they had known in months. Mary cooked supper, her hands moving with familiar rhythm, and the children crowded around her to help. The table was full again, warm food, laughter, and stories of the weeks she had been gone. Tom watched them, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. After the children went to bed, Mary stepped outside to look at the stars. Tom followed a few minutes later, standing beside her in the cool night air. The sky stretched wide and full above them. "I almost thought you wouldn't come back," he said softly. "I almost didn't," she admitted, but something inside me kept reminding me of this place. It wasn't just the children. It was the peace I found here, the kind I'd searched for my whole life. Tom looked at her, the moonlight touching his face. "You brought that peace, Mary. It didn't exist before you." She smiled faintly. "Peace doesn't come from one person, Mr. Harris. It grows when hearts open again. Yours did. The children's did. I only helped you remember." He wanted to say more, to tell her what she truly meant to him, but words felt small. Instead, he said quietly, "Thank you for coming back." She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you for letting me." The following weeks were brighter than ever. The ranch flourished. The garden bloomed stronger that summer, and the animals grew healthier. The children worked with joy, proud of their chores. Even the neighbors noticed the change. When they passed by, they said the Harris place looked happier than any in the valley. One afternoon, while helping Sarah bake bread, Mary told the children about dreams. "Dreams," she said, "are like seeds. You plant them in your heart, water them with kindness, and one day they grow into something beautiful." "Then ours grew," Molly said with a grin, "because you came back." Mary laughed and hugged her. Maybe so. Tom often watched these moments quietly. He had learned not to speak too quickly, to let things unfold naturally. But deep down he knew his life had changed forever. The loneliness that had followed him for years had been replaced with something steady and warm. One evening, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset, he spoke softly. "Mary, I've been thinking. I know this ranch isn't easy and life out here is rough, but I'd like you to stay, truly stay. Not just as someone who works here, but as someone who belongs here for good." The children froze, then looked at Mary with wide eyes. She blinked, surprised. "You mean," he nodded, "I mean family. You already are one of us. You've been that from the moment you walked through our gate." Tears filled her eyes. For a long moment she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "I never thought I'd hear words like that again." Tom smiled. "Then let this be the last time you doubt it. You've given this home life again. Let it be yours too." From that day on, everything changed gently but surely. Mary was no longer just a helper. She was the heart of the family. The children called her Ma before long, without even thinking about it. She tried to correct them at first, but Tom only smiled and said, "Let them. It's what you are to them." The ranch thrived under her care. The fields yielded more. The garden grew richer, and the laughter of 6 children echoed louder than ever across the plains. When storms came, no one feared anymore because they knew they had someone who would keep the fire burning and the house warm. Years passed, and the children grew taller and stronger. They learned everything from her: the importance of kindness, the courage to keep going, and the beauty of finding joy in small things. Every night she still sang the same lullaby, though now her voice carried a softer tone of peace, not sorrow. One evening, long after the chores were done and the stars were bright, Tom and Mary sat outside watching the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of gold fading into deep blue. "Do you remember the first night you sang here?" Tom asked. She nodded. "I remember the candlelight, the quiet, and how the children finally slept." "I remember something else," he said gently. "That was the first night I slept too." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then I guess we both found rest in the same song." The wind moved softly through the tall grass. The old house behind them glowed with light, laughter drifting faintly from inside. The world was calm again, peaceful and full of life. In that moment, Mary knew she had made the right choice. She had wandered far, searching for a place to belong, and in the heart of a lonely rancher's home, among 6 children who once could not sleep, she had found it. When the night deepened and the stars spread wide above the plains, her voice rose once more in that same gentle lullaby. The children listened from their rooms, smiling sleepily, and Tom leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Peace had finally come, not as a gift from the world, but as something they had built together, one song, one act of kindness, and one open heart at a time. The ranch that once knew sleepless nights now rested under the quiet sky, alive with love, warmth, and the soft memory of a woman who changed it forever. And from that night onward, not one of them, child or grown, ever went to bed without hearing her song.